I invite you, if it feels comfortable to you, to close your eyes or soften your gaze for a few moments as we prepare for meditation. We thank you, God, the greatest hope and the greatest mystery of our lives. We thank you for this moment of community, of our church family drawing together. We seem to be few in number, but we are strong and courageous of heart. And we know that we are here, we are sent to take our strength and our love and our courage out into the world. We do this with every interaction that we have with ourselves, with those closest to us, with those farthest from us, with those with whom we agree, and especially with those with whom we do not agree. Every movement, every act, every thought, every prayer is of use to God. Nothing we do is wasted. Everything is a gift, a lesson, something to pass along. We are rooted deeply in the ground of I am, of your I am, and of what we are, and what you would have us do, and what we are to become. You remind us to be gentle with ourselves. So often we are gentle with others, but not with ourselves. We will take a few moments in the silence now, dear one, as we receive your messages to us, messages that we are not only okay, we are your magnificent creations, and we are made to be your instrument. We can begin now to come back to this place and this time, but don't hurry. Take your time. This is your time. Beloved, we thank you for these precious moments in communion with you and in community with each other. We are grateful. Thank you. Amen. I see you. Each one of you. I am here for you. I am here for each one of you. I will not turn away. I will never turn away from you. You matter to me. Your stories, every one of your stories matter to me. Your story is my story and our story. Today's message is about bearing witness. What I just did, looking at you, assuring you that I see you, that I am here for you. That, in a nutshell, is bearing witness. But I'll still have more to say about it. How does it differ from simply witnessing? Here's an example. You may witness a car crash, the aftermath of it. You see it as you drive by. Bearing witness would be if you were right there at the scene as it happened. It is being wholly present to what is. If that were the case, you might have held the hand of the driver as they crawled out of their car. You might have given them some water. You might have called 911. So witnessing is the more passive act of seeing or observing an event or a person. It doesn't call you to action. And in fact, there may be no action that you can take. Bearing witness is involvement, commitment. We carry the situation or the person in our hearts. We let it in, all the way in. We feel empathy. We are present. We speak often of a pregnant woman as bearing a child. She is intimately connected to that child both before and after its birth. She carries it in her heart, in her body, in her soul. Here are some examples of bearing witness. A friend of mine recently told me about a friend of hers who called her each morning to say hi and check in on her. That woman recently passed away, and my friend misses her laughter, misses their time together. She also greatly misses that morning phone call because she lives alone, and that daily connection reminded her that she existed, that she mattered. Because I have lived alone quite a while in the recent years, I could relate to my friend's need to be seen. I remember thinking if a woman falls in the house like a tree falls in the forest, does anybody know? I'm sure some of you can relate to that. So I could relate to her feelings. So I began to text her a short message or a picture every morning. I think of her as I choose the picture or the words. Usually the words are only 5 or 6 of them. I hold her in my heart during that moment. This is my way of bearing witness to her existence and saying to her, I see you. You matter to me. Last month, I told you about the old cherry tree that fell in our backyard. I mentioned how my children and my husband did the heavy work of chopping up the trunk and carrying the big chunks of the tree to the truck and making a pile this tall of twigs and smaller branches. Since I had a sore shoulder that day, my main contribution was keeping everybody hydrated and fed. I remember at that moment, I felt a bit guilty sometimes watching them, feeling that I had done very little to help. But later, I realized I had done much more than that. I had seen and acknowledged in prayer God's love within the tree and within the unity of our family. I had expressed gratitude for the tree's beauty, for my family, and for the meal that the twigs and leaves provided for the deer. So, on a day when I felt that I'd just been standing around, it turns out I had been bearing witness to my family's efforts, to the tree's life and death, and to the workings of the Creator in the midst of it all. I'm sure you know this congregation bears witness to others in many ways. We bring in food for those in need in Talmage, and we make lunches for unhomed people who are fed daily at St. Bernard's Church. Do you realize that this is what we are saying as a church when we do this? I see you, young mother. I see you feeding your child with the cereal and peanut butter we gave you. I see you, woman or man, who gets one of the St. B's lunches that we made. We are saying, we see you. We see your need. We won't turn away. You matter to us. We also bear witness around here by checking up on anyone who's usually here on Sunday when they miss church a time or two. I mean, they almost feel guilty if they go on vacation because somebody calls and says, "Are you all right?" We are very good at that. Pat yourselves on the back. The Unity Movement began as a prayer ministry, as you know, and prayer is still one of the most powerful ways our church community bears witness to one another. Our prayer team pours forth love and care to every name on that prayer list. The goal isn't to fix people or to resolve their challenges. It isn't, above all, to judge them. It isn't to offer advice. It's empathy. Our prayer is simply being fully present to whatever is. One of the most beautiful forms of ministry Unity has is the High Watch that Linda mentioned a few moments ago, and which takes place right after church in the room down the hall, where Marty will be waiting for you. Sometimes folks hear the word High Watch mentioned in the announcements, but they don't understand what it is. It is holding space for someone. That means simply sitting in a room with a person who may or may not mention a specific need. High Watch isn't about giving feedback, it's about listening. Listening. Taking who they are, into your heart, praying for the highest possible good for them. Creating an environment where they can hear their own thoughts and feel their own feelings. A powerful part of this is the silence. In the silence, the other person's pain or frustration or grief or anger enters into your heart and your mind. This means you are bearing the person's pain, and it helps them to bear it. As a minister, I've found that what I've described here, simply sitting quietly with someone, is often, and I would say usually, the greatest form of pastoral care I can offer. I came upon an amazing example of this in the book of Job in the Old Testament. I'm sure you're familiar with Job's story. He had a series of misfortunes and tragedies, including losing all of his children, his wife, his home, his work, and his health. Now later in Job, it talks about his friends kind of berating him, saying, well, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? But first, before that happened, 3 of his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who lived in various places some distance away from Job, they each simultaneously went to help him, and they all 3 arrived at the same time. When they heard of this misfortune and they set out, they didn't know what they were going to do, what they were going to find, how he was going to be, did they? The Bible story says that when they arrived, they simply sat on the ground near him and without a word sat there for 7 days. That's quite a commitment. Without saying a word, I would have trouble with that. Big trouble. It's really hard to imagine. But guess what? 2,500 years later, this same act of bearing witness is repeated on a daily basis all over the world, particularly among the Jewish population, by friends and family who come to comfort those who are grieving. It is named for what Job's friends did for him. It's called sitting Shiva, which means sitting seven. I never knew that's what the name meant. Sitting seven. It is a powerful form of love, respect, and care. I have another example similar to sitting Shiva. Last month, someone I knew and loved died tragically and suddenly at the age of 55. This was a man who was joyous, compassionate, deeply devoted to his 24-year-old son, his parents, his extended family, active in the community. He was someone who gave generously to those in need, and he was greatly loved and appreciated by all who knew him. I have never seen so many people coming to pay their respects and honor a loved one as I saw at the funeral home that day. The receiving line at the calling hours stretched outside the doors of the funeral home and down the street. People had to park their cars blocks away. And for 2 hours, the calling hours were 2 hours, during that 2 hours, a steady stream of love, expressed with tears and hugs, radiated its way through the rooms and hallways of that funeral home and right into the hearts of all who were present. It never stopped. It was a continuous stream, and I thought, my God, how can these rooms hold this much love? It was beautiful. The man who died was a very close friend of my son Mike, and had been for over 25 years. The two of them, with several other men, I think 3, had formed a bond that ran deep. We sometimes think that men don't have intimate relationships, but these young men did. Their attachment was so intimate, so close. A brotherhood that nurtured them, and a connection that was so strong, and it continued to include their wives and children when they got older. This, then, was a time of great sorrow. As a mother, you never outgrow the wish to make it better for your child when he or she is hurting. Yet I could find no words to offer to Mike that could possibly encompass the enormity of this loss. All I could do was stand near him throughout the long calling hours and memorial service. All I could do was stand there and witness and absorb his grief and that of all his friends, all those young men crying together. And I prayed. At the memorial service, I met Mike's late friend's mother. When I told her I was Mike's mom, she started to cry and she hugged me and she said, Mike has been at our house every single day in the 2 weeks since this happened, sitting there with me, my husband, and our grandson. He just sits there with us. I saw Mike's courage and love, his dedication, both to bearing his own pain and trying to alleviate that of others. This is one of the finest gifts any of us can ever hope to give anyone else, our presence. It seems so easy, but it's pretty hard, isn't it, sometimes? I recently learned that there is a very touching way that hospital personnel bear witness when someone who's technically dead is being taken to the operating room for removal of organs that they have asked to donate, they've chosen to donate. It is called the honor walk. Every hospital employee along the route from where the patient is being taken to the ER, all the way to the ER, every hospital employee comes out, stands in the hall. I'm talking administrative personnel, the janitor, the doctors, the nurses, everyone lines the hallways, to witness the life that has ended and the gift that is being given. No one moves or speaks. It is a solemn moment in which everyone remains emotionally and physically present. Their message is, I see this, I feel this, I honor this, I will not turn away. Speaking of not turning away, every day I try to get past my anger and feelings of helplessness about the thousands of men, women, and children our government has rounded up like cattle without due process and put into cages. I know my anger will not help them. I know that only love will help them. I know this. But I find it is easier to feed my anger than it is to truly bear witness to their situation. But I try to center myself in love, to move away from anger. I visualize in my heart a particular family out of the thousands. Maybe it's a mother, father, 2 kids. I think about their work, their home, their life before they were rounded up. And it hurts to do that. Damn it, it hurts. It hurts to bear witness. But I try to do so. And then, this is the hardest part of all. I try very earnestly to pray for those who created this drastic solution and for those who are carrying it out. And I also try very earnestly to send love to all of them too. When Jesus' friend Lazarus died, his sisters Mary and Martha were heartbroken, of course, with grief. I find it interesting, really interesting, that when Jesus arrives on the scene, even though he knows that he will soon raise Lazarus from the dead, he first sits with the women as they cry. He is deeply troubled by their sorrow and by his own. He bears witness to their grief and he shares it. He weeps with them. There is one, are you okay? Oh, you're counting, okay. There is one verse in the Bible, I forget which chapter, which writer it is, but the 2 words, Jesus wept. That was what's in there. That was all it said. Jesus wept, and then it went to another verse. Anyway, he deeply entered into the suffering of those he loves, and he also shared, of course, their great joy when Lazarus returned to them. He's always there in the mix. Whatever it is, he's right there. Speaking of joy, we also bear witness to joyous events, don't we? Think of how happily we share the news of a new baby in the family, or the smiles that everyone has on their face during a wedding, the moments we spend laughing with our friends. My one friend and I laugh about things that, even if we haven't had a cocktail, we laugh about things that are just ridiculous, but that's part of, we bear witness to each other's ridiculousness. So there's a lot that we do, a lot of moments that are easier for us to experience deeply. The more difficult moments to which we bear witness often include sorrow or anger or frustration, but all moments, the silly ones, the ridiculous ones, the sad ones, they're all meant to be invited in, to be fully present, to bear witness. I love it when I find a new perspective on an old story. For example, I recently read an essay by Diana Butler Bass. Does anybody know her work, Diana Butler Bass? She's incredible. I highly recommend anything she's written. She's an author and a preacher. And this is another story about bearing witness. She studied the story in Matthew chapter 14 that has been known as the miraculous loaves and fishes story, and found her attention caught by the passage just before that story. She suggests that there was a second miracle that day. Sermons usually start with that 13th verse, she said, which says Jesus had withdrawn in a boat to find a deserted place where he could be alone. The verses that preceded that sentence told of John the Baptist's death. it said, John's disciples took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. Then Jesus got in the boat. He must have been shocked and devastated, grieving, having just learned of the fate of his friend and cousin. The story focuses, in general, usually on Jesus eventually coming ashore and beginning to preach, right? Well, the chapter says that as darkness approached, he told the disciples to feed the crowd, and though they had little food, they were able to feed everybody. You know all that, the rest of the story. But the people, Bass believes, were not simply miracle groupies chasing the latest spiritual celebrity. They knew Jesus very well. The verse in Matthew says, when the crowd heard of this, the death of John, they followed Jesus on foot from village to village, staying as close to him as possible. So Bass wonders if they were thinking about, well, what will Jesus do next? Is he, and they were feeling uneasy themselves. Is someone else going to die? We don't know. But she said, she thinks they were following him out of compassion. I love this. She said that they hoped their presence would comfort Jesus as he so often comforted them, that they were bearing witness to him instead of the other way around, that they were simply being there for him. And they also were grieving because they knew John the Baptist. So maybe they weren't merely seeking something from him, but also showing empathy to him, to one who had given so much to them. Maybe this was more like a funeral procession. We don't know. Of course, we don't know. We will never know. But Bass's story about the crowd bearing witness really intrigued me. Do you ever feel that you don't do enough for others? Do you sometimes feel that prayer isn't enough? I certainly do. So much of life is we spend it weighing and measuring. Where did we feel we did enough? Where do we feel that we fell short? Life has so many ways to try our patience. One of the most difficult, at least for me, is waiting. Does anybody here like to wait? Waiting to hear the outcome of someone's visit to the emergency room. Waiting to hear the results of somebody's college entrance exams or their job interview. Waiting for God's guidance. I always pray to God and say, I pray for patience. I say, I need patience and I need it now. So it doesn't work that way. Or waiting to hear that our children or grandchildren got home safely from a trip, waiting in doctor's offices, waiting in line at the grocery store. This came to mind the other day when I recalled a powerful statement written in the 1600s by the English poet John Milton, in a sonnet called When I Consider How My Light is Spent. The poem reflects on his total loss of his eyesight, his subsequent worry about losing the ability to write, and his concern about how he might serve God without his vision. I believe Milton resolved those concerns in the final line of his sonnet, which I imagine you will find familiar. They also serve, who only stand and wait. That quote kind of takes us full circle, I think. Let's kind of recap. I began today by explaining the difference between witnessing and bearing witness. Next, recalling that Unity began as a prayer ministry, I spoke of the many ways our church family bears witness, both in prayer and in action. And that, in many cases, as our High Watch team models for us, we often bear witness in silence. We also considered the need to get beyond our own anger, frustration, and feelings of helplessness so that we may more effectively serve others. And we talked about the need to emulate Jesus, who loved and prayed for those who hurt others, as well as for those who had been hurt. Another reminder was the fact that on many occasions we have opportunities to bear witness to joy and carry that to others. And that all moments in life. Invite us to be fully present. Bearing witness, standing in solidarity with others is a sacred experience for both parties. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. The moments in which we realize the truth of each other are holy moments. It's about vulnerability on both sides, reverence, allowing oneself to be a vessel that can hold someone's feelings, whether they're joyful or painful, frustrating. It's also how we connect more closely with each other. A reminder that we are all one, that we are all part of the divine. In closing, I see you, each and every one of you. I am here for you. I will not turn away. I will never turn away. You matter to me. All of you matter to me. I love you. And so it is. Amen.